Hello and good morning. My name is James Wilmot from Forum Europe, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our 11th annual Data Protection and Privacy Conference taking place this year fully virtually. As many of you will be aware, it was only last week that the decision was taken to drop the hybrid element of this year's gathering. And while this was obviously the sensible thing to do, we're all retaining an optimism that the next edition excuse me, will be in person. And I should like to thank all of the speakers and sponsors and those of you that had planned to attend in person for your flexibility through this process. So moving on now to get things started, I would imagine that most of you will have by now used our virtual platform and will be generally familiar with the functionality, but briefly, the most important tool you have as the audience at your disposal is the chat function, which can be found on the right-hand side of your screen. Use this to talk to each other, to pose comments and questions as part of the panel discussions, and we promise to include you as regularly and as much as possible as we move through the day's proceedings. You'll find most of what you need in the reception area of the platform, but if you have any practical or logistical questions, post them in the chat and we'll respond very quickly with any support that might be required. There are also a number of other features that I'm not going to go into too much detail on now, including networking and one-to-one conversation tools that you're free to use and explore. And I'd encourage you to give those a try during the breaks. If you're planning to tweet and follow the comments on Twitter, you can do so at EUData21. Before I close and hand over to the speakers for the first session, I wanted to thank again and express Forum Europe's appreciation to our sponsors for this year's event, namely, in the alphabetical order, Baker McKenzie, BSA, the Software Alliance, Google, Meta, Microsoft, OneTrust, SAP and Workday, all of whom have been a pleasure to collaborate with, as I said, during what's been quite a turbulent, once again, turbulent organisation of a conference in this current context. If you're interested in working with Forum Europe on the organisation of your policy events, or if you'd like more details on our own initiative pipeline, our contact details are found at forum-europe.com. Or again, you can reach out to us in the chat at any point during the day. So with all that said, to kick off, we will this morning have a keynote session featuring European Commission Vice President Vera Jourová. We have Eric Dupond-Moretti, the French Justice Minister, Minister Dikaučič, the Minister of Justice in Slovenia, and Kent Walker, who's the President for Global Affairs at Google. This opening session, as is now tradition, will be moderated by Forum Europe's chairman, Paul Adamson. So I'll hand over to Paul now, and Paul, the floor is yours.
Thank you, James. Happy to be part of this tradition. So here we are today now, gathering for the 11th edition of the European Data Protection and Privacy Conference, fully virtually, as James explained, for rather obvious reasons. We'll be debating and discussing the most pertinent and timely data privacy issues through interactive panel discussions, speeches, and interviews.
So we were just trying to work out if that was just Paul or if it was the internet generally, but I think it might just be Paul. So while we try and figure out what's happened with Paul's connection there, I think what Paul was heading towards doing was introducing the Vice President. So if you're ready, Vice President, there we are, perfect. You're on mute, Vice President, as well. Excellent. So you can hear us and we can hear you very well, I hope. So brilliant. So yeah, without further ado, Vice President, the floor is yours. Thank you very much again for being with us this year.
Thank you, James. You can imagine what Paul would have said. So I'm happy to be with you today, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. I want to start by thanking the organizers and all the guests. It is already the second year in a row where the pandemic has turned our plans and your plans upside down. And I am, that's why, very glad that you have sufficient determination to get this event going, because we have indeed a lot of things to discuss. It's been only 3 years since the GDPR applies, but we all have seen massive change in the policy discussion and technology developments. My first conclusion is that GDPR proved to be agile and flexible to react in times of crisis. The COVID pandemic was the ultimate test for this. Very quickly we saw that data and technology can help us in the fight against the pandemic and in keeping our borders open. The digital certificate works very well across the EU, and people that use it can fully trust their data will not be misused or abused. This brings me to my second take, namely that GDPR is essential to generate trust in digital transition and digital solutions. I think we can all agree that without people's trust, there will be societal resistance to innovation. We can already see this happening with, for instance, campaigns against 5G and burning the masts. And while technology speeds up and digital solutions enter almost every aspect of our lives, we will need this trust at a very high level. And I have to insist that GDPR is such a trust enabler. The GDPR rules and principles are embedded in all our proposals that touch upon technology, be it regulation on artificial intelligence, Data Act, Digital Services Act, or my recently proposed law on transparency of political advertising. Simply, GDPR has already become our anchor and our compass. GDPR is a cornerstone of our digital soul. We use the new pieces of legislation to build on GDPR and flesh out rights that GDPR provided us with, yet the market is slowly in making them a reality. Contrary to what we sometimes hear, we do not have to choose between, on the one hand, the protection of personal data, and on the other hand, public health, security, or economic well-being. Rather than involving such false trades-off, privacy and data protection are prerequisites for people to embrace innovative solutions without fear and with full trust. This brings me to my third point, namely enforcement. Effective implementation and enforcement are key to ensure that GDPR is fully respected. Here, I would like to encourage all of you to take all aspects of enforcement into account before passing the judgment. I know there is a lot of criticism recently about enforcement. I know there are civil society organizations who would want to see more action, both from the data protection authorities and the Commission. I understand this and to a large extent share this urge. But first, let's look at some facts. Let me start with the obvious. The enforcement of the GDPR belongs to national data protection authorities and national courts. Data protection authorities also play an essential role in the European Data Protection Board, including in particular the one-stop shop mechanism for cross-border cases. This is the mechanism that was seen as optimal solution, not only by the Commission, but also by the Member States and the European Parliament. It has pluses. The enforcement authorities are closer to citizens and local companies. They are there not only to punish, but also to assist and support compliance. Let's look at some statistics. 809 procedures related to the one-stop shop have been triggered, out of which 290 final decisions have been issued. Data protection authorities have launched more than 7,000 procedures to assist each other, most of them on voluntary basis. These two figures alone show that the authorities are working together. They are striving to create European culture of data protection enforcement. And this is exactly what we wanted. Just 2 days ago, I spoke about this with the head of the French authority, CNIL, and she shared the same view. But does this mean that everything is fine? No, it is not. In my view, it does take too long to address the key questions around processing of personal data for big tech. Yes, I understand the lack of resources. I understand there is no pan-European procedural law to help the cross-border cases. I understand that the first cases need to be rock solid because they will be challenged in courts. But I want to be honest, we are in the crunch time now. Either we will all collectively show that GDPR enforcement is effective, or it will have to change. And there is no way back to decentralized model that was there before the GDPR. Any potential changes will go towards more centralization, bigger role of the European Data Protection Board or the Commission. And I feel the pressure. The pressure is already here. We can see it in the debate on the Digital Services Act, where member states want to see more central role of the European Commission. And I am here to support and help, but with full respect of the independence of the authorities. Ladies and gentlemen, when I was looking at existing enforcement decisions and pending cases, I also came to another conclusion. We have penalties or decisions against Google, Facebook, WhatsApp. To me, this means that clearly there is a problem with compliance culture among those companies that live off our personal life. That despite the fact that they have the best legal teams, presence in Brussels, and spend countless hours discussing with us the GDPR. Sadly, I fear this is not privacy by design. I think it is high time for those companies to take protection of personal data seriously. And I want to see full compliance, and I would not like to see legal tricks. It is time not to hide behind small print, but tackle the challenges ahead of. Let's make a final point. The demand for the protection of personal data knows no borders. This is a truly global trend running. To mention just a few examples, from Chile to South Korea, from Brazil to Japan, from Kenya to India, from Tunisia to Indonesia, or from California to Taiwan. I am very proud that Europe is a standard setter in this respect. In the EU, we are firmly committed to facilitating trusted data transfers. GDPR provides for a set of tools to achieve it, and our digital diplomacy is in full swing to promote these solutions. If you allow me, I'd like also to turn to a hot topic in this context, the Privacy Shield successor negotiations. Talks about the contents of the new Privacy Shield are ongoing. This remains a priority on both sides. However, it is also clear that the only way to develop a durable and sustainable solution is to work on an agreement that is fully in line with the case law of the Court of Justice. We have now entered into the substance of the issues and are discussing the details of possible solutions. At the same time, we need a new instrument fully compliant with the Schrems II judgment. This is also the only way to develop a durable solution, one that ensures the stability and legal certainty that stakeholders expect on both sides of the Atlantic. But I do believe there are possible solutions for the thousands of companies that rely on data flows every day to trade with their business partners, customers, or subsidiaries. As like-minded partners, we should be able to find appropriate solutions on principles that are cherished on both sides of the Atlantic, such as, first thing, access to court, second, enforceable individual rights, and third, minimizing interferences with data protection in line with the principles of necessity and proportionality. To conclude, I think we have turned the page on the GDPR. I must say I am really happy to see how the debate is evolving in Europe, but also globally. Strong data protection rules are finally seen as necessity, not a luxury. In Brussels and for the EU Commission, GDPR remains an inspiration of how to translate our values and Charter of Fundamental Rights into legislative text. So, while I am expecting that we will all go together through many ups and downs, I am confident that the GDPR will be our compass on how to address the challenges that we will be facing in the new digital decade. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. My apologies for not being around earlier. I apologize for that. I have a quick question for you, if I may, which is about your tone was rather sober. I mean, after the euphoria of the adoption of GDPR 3 years ago, now there's all of the thrust of your remarks were all about compliance, enforcement, and so on. Your last point about the privacy shield, the hot topic that you talk about. How confident are you about some agreement being reached in the not too distant future between the United States and Europe? Because obviously this is a key element, and what is the basis of your confidence, if you are confident?
Time you ask me about how confident I am regarding privacy shield or previous safe harbor. Well, we are doing our best. The European jurisdiction says clear word. Yeah, and I spoke about the three main conditions, the enforcement of rights, the access to court and so on, which we need to have guaranteed on the other side of the Atlantic, including the access to private data of Europeans from the position of the security bodies. So nothing new. We have stronger language in the Schrems II court decision, and the American partners are aware that we have no other choice than to insist on making the new system much stronger and focusing on these main three aspects. So we asked the new American partners, because we are discussing with new people there, new administration, to be more creative, more able to understand European way of thinking and European need to follow the ECJ ruling. We could have some solution which might be durable by the end of the year to start opening up for the public, or for the bodies which have to be consulted, especially the European Data Protection Board and the European Parliament after the new year. But we have not finished the discussions with the American side. This is the most optimistic scenario, that by the end of the year, we will have some kind of solid proposal, which will also cover or bring some new solutions of the better protection on American side.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Thank you, Vera. Before we move on, I'd just like to thank you, because you've accepted our invitation to give the opening keynote address this conference every year since you've been Commissioner 7 years ago. So I'm personally grateful to you for that.
Yes, thank you. And I remember much better years when I had a direct contact with the people. Sorry, We have to get out of this misery.
Absolutely. Next time. Okay. Well, we're moving on now. It gives me very great pleasure now to introduce the Minister of Justice of Slovenia, Marjan Dikaučič. So over to you, Minister, and thank you very much for being with us this morning.
Thank you, dear Paul, dear Vera, dear Eric, dear Senior Vice President Walker, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank Forum Europe for the invitation and for organizing the 11th Annual Data Protection and Privacy Conference. It is an honor to participate at such an event, especially when considering the speakers that will take the stage, the topics they will tackle, and the volume of knowledge they will share with us. The right to the protection of personal data and the right to privacy lay at the foundation of the European Union and are for these reasons protected in the treaties and the Charter of Fundamental Rights. I am very pleased that the discussion taking place today will focus on some of the key aspects and challenges we are currently facing in this regard. In this intervention, I will briefly touch upon some of those aspects. It is hard to imagine the volume of data flow within a single business entity, and it is next to impossible to imagine the volume of data flow within a single member state within the European Union, and especially across the globe at any given moment. At its core, it is a piece of information sent from one point to another. If we scale it up and repeat this process over and over, it becomes the driving force of innovation, the backbone of business development, and essential tool for prevention and prosecution of criminal activity, and much more. It becomes the cornerstone of our endeavor towards prosperity and security. Considering this, the European Union adopted the General Data Protection Regulation and the Law Enforcement Directive. Both instruments are aimed at reinforcing the right to the protection of personal data and enhancing the flow of information within the EU and between member states and third countries. New data protection legislation has increased and continues to increase the level of citizens' awareness, not only about the existence of such a right, but also of the conditions and principles under which an individual's personal data may be processed. It is safe to say that data protection, a key of the European Union, is the golden standard for data protection legislation worldwide. International flow of data allows businesses across the globe to cooperate and to flourish. For this reason, it should be further developed, supported, and not constrained. However, only the global convergence of personal data protection standards will foster the trust of individuals. The Court of Justice of the European Union emphasized the right of EU citizens to data protection in its judgment in the Schrems II case. On the one hand, this landmark judgment significantly changed the way we approach transfers of data to third countries and imposed additional obligations for data processors and controllers, but on the other, it could be a catalyst for the harmonization of high data protection standards worldwide, making the international transfers of EU citizens' data safer, faster, and in line with the EU acquis. Nevertheless, the impact of such judgments on fundamental legal principles such as legal certainty, as well as their impact on business enterprises of member states and their partners in third countries, must be considered in the future. the level of data protection afforded to EU citizens in third countries when transferring personal data should be essentially equivalent to the level of data protection guaranteed within the EU. Upholding the standards set in the treaties, the Charter, GDPR, and the case law of the Court of Justice of the European Union should be at the core of our approach to transfer of personal data to third countries in the future. Development of new technologies and innovation are among the few aspects of our future that we can certain of. Bearing in mind this certainty, we should also look at digitalization of the judicial systems. Whenever we discuss the introduction of new technologies into the judiciary, the essential and basic issue is, above all, the scope of their impact on fundamental rights, on freedom, as recognized by the Charter and the European Convention on Human Rights. We are all aware of the numerous benefits of digitizing justice at national and EU level, within the aim of improving the efficiency of proceedings before courts and the court's administration processes that take place outside the courtrooms as well. After all, the experience of COVID-19 pandemic has taught us that the proper use of modern technology allow us to work in the most unpredictable and challenging circumstances. It also highlighted the need to commit and stick to the path that leads to improving technological solutions. However, and this is essential, we must always consider the ethical aspects of such solutions. The objective of increasing the efficiency of justice must always be accompanied by full respect of the rule of law and of the fundamental rights and freedom of all the stakeholders of the justice system. Considering the groundbreaking nature of the technology that was developed in the last couple of decades, it is now absolutely clear that the ethical aspects of such a progress will become even more crucial in the future. The abundance of data coupled with the advanced technological solutions paved the way for artificial intelligence to become an essential part of our lives. And it is not likely that the development of AI will slow down any time soon. The development of AI is at its very core aimed at improving our lives, either through enhancement of healthcare, reaching higher level of sustainability, or streamlining business development. However, certain solutions such as facial recognition technology pose a greater risk to the right of individuals to privacy and protection of their personal data. Therefore, democratic oversight is crucial when deploying it. Human rights implication of new technologies and the need to effectively protect them when developing and using AI solutions are being broadly discussed on national, regional, and international levels. It is in the interest of the global community that all relevant international organizations cooperate to lay down universal standards for the use of AI in a way that will fully protect and respect fundamental rights. And constant technological development which will enable the use of digital tools across all sectors of our societies is inevitable. We can assume that the tools used for improving our everyday lives will also be used for malicious purposes. And this can already be seen when digital tools are used for communicating between perpetrators and for the execution of most gruesome criminal offenses. One of the greatest challenges of digitalization in this respect is the increase of online child sexual abuse. Therefore, it is crucial for us to acknowledge that the children's rights need to be protected and promoted offline as well as online, and that efforts are needs to harness the opportunities offered by the digital environment while limiting the risk it can pose to children in line of the fulfillment of their rights. There is no instant long-term solution to finding the perfect balance between the protection of fundamental rights and freedoms and the prevention and prosecution of criminal activity. However, this perfect balance is the goal we must strive for. I wish you a great conference and plenty of fruitful discussions.
Thank you very much indeed, Marjan, Minister. One quick question, if I may, before you go back to your day job as Minister of Justice. You covered a huge amount of ground there, but in your opinion, what are the other measures that should be taken along with the robust legal framework that you talked about in order to protect the right to privacy in the future?
Yeah, thank you, Paul, for this very, I will say, relevant question. A robust and clear legal framework is the cornerstone of the protection of fundamental rights and freedoms, and which also guarantees legal certainty. As I have already mentioned, balancing the protection of these fundamental rights and freedoms on the one hand and the interest of the public to prevent and prosecute criminal activity on the other is of utmost importance. However, one of the key questions for the legislators and also for the policy makers in terms of future proofing the right to privacy is also achieving the balance between the protection of fundamental rights and freedoms and enabling the safe use of internet. Certain level of protection is already embedded into our legal systems and will be further strengthened with the adoption of Digital Services Act, which will also impose new obligation for providers of online content. However, along with that, we also need to develop comprehensive policies, including non-legislative measures and approaches, invest into training and education, and closely cooperate with all stakeholders. If we take children, for example, their exposure to the online world and the internet starts at a very early age. They are therefore definitely one of the most vulnerable groups of our societies, and for that reasons we need a comprehensive policy approach which will act complementary to the legal framework aimed at increasing opportunities for children to be responsible and resilient members of the digital society, in particular by investing in ensuring equal access and support to digital means for every child, then empowering children to be conscious media users by supporting the development of media and information literacy needed to critically examine, evaluate, and produce online content. Then providing protection from existing and emerging risk in the digital environment by focusing on this digital literacy, privacy, and online safety. And also developing support services for children that were victims of online abuse. To sum up my answer to your question, this empowering and educating future generations will also play a fundamental role for the protection of the rights to privacy in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Marjan, and thank you for your time today. You're a busy person. We appreciate the time you take to be with us this morning. Thank you, sir. And now we have an intervention from the French Minister of Justice, Éric Dupond-Moretti. This is a pre-recorded intervention that was recorded yesterday evening. So we now hear from the French Minister of Justice, Éric Dupond-Moretti. Thank you.
Madame la vice-présidente, chère Vera Jourová, mesdames et messieurs les parlementaires, mesdames, messieurs, depuis 11 ans, une conférence annuelle permet de faire le point sur les avancées européennes en matière de protection des données et de la protection de la vie privée. Je suis heureux d'y participer cette année alors que la présidence française du Conseil de l'Union européenne va commencer dans quelques semaines. La France avait joué un rôle moteur dans l'adoption en 2016 du RGPD. 6 ans après, nous sommes heureux de voir que ce texte est devenu le véritable standard international en matière de protection des données personnelles. Du Chili au Kenya, du Japon à la Californie ou à la Corée du Sud, de nombreux pays tiers s'inspirent désormais du RGPD. Comme le président de la République, Emmanuel Macron, le souligne régulièrement, ce texte est un bel exemple de la capacité de l'Europe à affirmer son leadership dans le plein respect des valeurs qui sont les siennes. Avec le recul, nous pouvons désormais dire que le RGPD est un succès que les acteurs économiques comme les citoyens se sont désormais appropriés. Sa mise en œuvre pose néanmoins plusieurs défis. En premier lieu, le défi de son application cohérente et homogène dans toute l'Union. Pour faciliter la vie des entreprises, le RGPD a mis en place un système de gouvernance innovant fondé sur le principe du guichet unique. Les autorités nationales de protection des données et le Comité européen en sont la pierre angulaire. Leur bonne coopération est essentielle au fonctionnement du système. Aucune ne peut faire cavalier seul. Il en va de la cohérence de l'espace juridique européen ainsi que de la loyauté de la concurrence entre les entreprises. La Cour de justice l'a d'ailleurs rappelé en juin dernier, c'est une belle illustration de la solidarité européenne. Le second défi concerne l'application internationale du RGPD, particulièrement en ce qui concerne les relations avec les États-Unis. Vous allez aborder ce sujet aujourd'hui. je forme le vœu que la Commission européenne puisse prochainement présenter les contours d'un nouvel accord avec les États-Unis qui permette aux entreprises européennes de bénéficier d'un cadre juridique stable et clarifié. Plus largement, je suis heureux que vos travaux portent sur deux questions qui me paraissent essentielles. D'une part, la conciliation entre la protection des données et l'innovation, et d'autre part, la conciliation entre la protection des données et les nécessités des enquêtes judiciaires et de la sécurité publique. Sur le sujet de l'innovation, je réfute l'idée que le RGPD soit un obstacle à l'innovation. Au contraire, je vais vous en donner un exemple tiré de la pratique du ministère de la Justice française. La Cour de cassation a mis en place depuis plusieurs années un programme ambitieux visant à diffuser en open data l'intégralité des décisions de justice rendues par ces tribunaux, tout niveau de juridiction confondu. Pour le mettre en œuvre, il a été nécessaire de rendre anonymes les décisions de justice, ce qui a été fait grâce à un outil d'intelligence artificielle qu'elle a développé. C'est un projet auquel je suis tout particulièrement attaché car il contribue directement à la transparence de la justice. Il concilie parfaitement à mes yeux modernité et respect exigeant de la protection des données. Protection des données personnelles et lutte efficace contre la criminalité doivent tout autant être compatibles. La directive dite police-justice, adoptée en même temps que le RGPD, propose un bon équilibre à cet égard. Cet équilibre doit être maintenu dans tous les domaines, et en particulier en matière de conservation des données de connexion. Ces données sont en effet essentielles dans la plupart des enquêtes criminelles et constituent des éléments de preuve objectifs, souvent plus fiables que les déclarations ou les témoignages. Ils peuvent d'ailleurs agir à charge comme à décharge. Il est bien sûr important que des garanties adéquates entourent cette conservation et qu'un juste équilibre entre les impératifs de la lutte contre la criminalité grave et la protection des droits fondamentaux soit trouvé. La France suivra avec attention les prochains développements jurisprudentiels à l'occasion des décisions à venir de la Cour de justice de l'Union européenne, de même que les négociations sur le règlement e-privacy. À cet égard, la négociation en 2020 et 2021 du règlement dérogatoire à la directive e-privacy pour permettre la détection et le retrait des contenus pédopornographiques en ligne a démontré qu'un tel équilibre était atteignable. C'est dans cet esprit que nous devons avancer, sans opposer de manière systématique et, pardon de le dire, parfois stérile, les enjeux de protection de la vie privée et la lutte efficace contre la criminalité. Je vous souhaite d'excellents travaux.
I would like to take this opportunity to thank the French Minister of Justice, even if he cannot hear me, for taking the time to address us this morning with that pre-recorded message. Thank you, Minister. And our final keynote address this morning is from Kent Walker, the President for Global Affairs and Chief Legal Officer at Google. Over to you, Kent.
Thank you very much, Paul, and thank you, Forum Europe, for having me. Vice President Jourová and the ministers have already discussed how Europe can continue its strong leadership in privacy and data protection, data governance, digital policy. We, of course, very much endorse that vision. And while technology can sometimes create challenges, today I'd like to talk a little bit about how technology itself can support that vision, can help make our online world more private, more trusted, more secure, and help us resolve important policy tensions that we're seeing. With the recovery from the pandemic, there's a historic acceleration of technology. We're seeing remarkable rates of adoption. Half the world is already online. The remainder is catching up quickly. And during lockdown, tech has been a lifeline for many and a catalyst for a comeback for small businesses. This tech acceleration, we call it, brings real opportunities, but also real responsibilities. And a key element of that is putting privacy and data protection front and center. The good news is that we're seeing an unprecedented era of innovation around privacy-preserving, privacy-enhancing technologies. That's not new for us as a company. Google was the first company to build a tool that lets you opt out of personalized ads. We were the first in the industry to offer the ability to auto-delete your data. And we were the first to create a takeout functionality, letting users easily download personal data and switch to other services. I remember when I first started with the company, we had a group of engineers called the Data Liberation Front, breaking the shackles of data. And that vision, then it helped inspire the Data Transfer Project, which was an industry-wide effort with other leading companies to promote open source data portability. That platform allows people to move data directly from one service to another one. And even beyond our own technical innovations and policy advances, we've probably invested more than any other company in creating new tools to comply with the GDPR's high standards. That said, we know that there's a need to continue to innovate and to do more to create a free and open web that is both private and secure. So what's the next frontier? Where do we go next? We've talked a bit about our commitment to privacy by design, to building privacy and data protection directly into our products. But now we need a greater investment in these privacy-preserving technologies. We need to go beyond privacy by design to achieve privacy by innovation. So what does that really mean? What is privacy by innovation? Well, we're a science and technology company. Roughly half of our employees are scientists and engineers. And those engineers take an approach that's rooted in math and in science. They believe in open standards. Our team's open source much of our work. Our engineers invented federated learning, a new approach to machine learning that actually enables processing on mobile devices without centralized training data. They built the world's largest open source library of differential privacy algorithms. And they've created privacy-preserving technologies that are built with technically enforced, verifiable privacy like anonymity. One example of where that kind of innovation has been essential to the future of the open web is privacy-safe advertising. Our privacy sandbox tool that's been much discussed helps develop new digital tools to protect privacy in a open source way, in a way that's being shared and discussed through standards bodies, but also allows us to support a thriving ad-supported web that benefits news publishers and merchants trying to reach customers and people just looking for more choices and better prices online. The Sandbox team developed tools in the open. They sought feedback at every step. They're committed to ensuring privacy and data protection by design and by default from the start in these new and important ways. And they and we are determined to ensure that these tools are developed in a way that works for the whole ecosystem, publishers and advertisers and everyday people, because getting that balance right is key. So as a result of their first of its kind, I think, discussions with both the Competition and Markets Authority and the Information Commissioner's Office in the UK, along with the broader web community, they've shared a set of commitments that I think help illustrate the way forward, working transparently and holistically with regulators as these technologies advance and as privacy standards evolve. Because we know that technology will keep advancing. Another example is the growing use of synthetic data and artificial intelligence, which can actually be used in lieu of personally identifiable information and still maintain the power of many digital services. Those kinds of tools can help us cut the Gordian knot of privacy, data protection, and competition, both upholding privacy and data protection values and supporting a competitive, open, and innovative marketplace. We see huge value in data protection authorities and competition regulators working through these issues together. And as we ramp up the regulation of technology, the key to sensible regulation will be reconciling important social values, limiting data sharing versus promoting data portability and open access and security, encouraging free expression and anonymity and access versus seeking to promote socially responsible content. As the minister mentioned, stopping child sexual abuse material online, but also and helping law enforcement, while also promoting data protection, privacy, confidentiality, and other important fundamental rights. And lastly, limiting online ads, or at least the desire to limit online ads, versus making content democratically accessible through an ad-supported, sustainable news ecosystem. Technological innovation can actually help us unlock some of these tensions in constructive new ways. But to do that, policymakers, regulated entities, technologists, civil society, academia are going to need to engage in a rich and an open discussion of these trade-offs to see how we can come together and strike the right balance. And technologists need to step up with new and with better innovations to transcend more of these tensions. We're committed to an open dialogue in the social issues and a deep investment in privacy-enhancing technologies that hold this kind of promise. We're optimistic that together we can invent new possibilities so that privacy and data protection will be by default, will be by design, but also will be by innovation. This is going to require democratic work of building regulatory frameworks, collaborating across regulators, and, as they said in the United States, bringing in the nerds to help brainstorm on new approaches. But the payoffs are going to be great in terms of promoting the beneficial spread of technologies that help everyone, raising living standards across the board. We can build on the new and the sensible regulations that are evolving while inventing and investing in privacy-preserving, privacy-enhancing technologies. With privacy and data protection by innovation, we can build privacy-safe web that leaves users informed and in control, that leaves publishers able to fund high-quality content, and that lets small businesses achieve great results and grow their operations. So thank you all very much for the time today. I hope that the complementary and constructive role of regulation and technological innovation will help spark new conversations as we go forward.
Thank you very much, Kent. I have a question for you. You talked a lot about the moving on from privacy by design to privacy by innovation as part of these privacy-preserving technologies you're talking about, and bring on the nerds. I look forward to seeing more nerds involved in this discussion. But more seriously, how could regulators and policymakers, how can they find out more about these kinds of new technologies that might help them with privacy and data protection?
It's an important question, Paul, and a partnership approach is clearly going to be key as we develop new technologies that actually can contribute to these questions. That's going to require an honest exchange and collaboration as the heart of that. And I have to say, regulators are making significant progress in hiring more engineers, more scientists. At the same time, we're working hard to engage with civil society groups and DPAs, academics, and others across the industry. So one good example is the work we did last year with DPAs when we were developing and assessing the COVID contact tracing API that we launched jointly with Apple at the request of public health authorities. There, our engineers had a really productive open exchange with scientists, with regulators, but we know we need to scale that kind of thing. We need to expand how engineers are engaging directly with regulators to create shared understanding and accountability. And we're giving a lot of thought to how we can do that, and are very open to ideas and feedback from the audience here today.
Well, thank you very much, Kent. We look forward to all that in the future. This brings to an end our opening keynote session, and I'd like to thank all our keynote speakers for being with us this morning, even the French minister from remote. Thank you, Vera, for staying throughout. It's extraordinary that you managed to find the time to be with us. I hope you found the discussion interesting, and hopefully, without being presumptuous, look forward to seeing you at our 12th edition at the end of 2022, hopefully in person, as you said earlier. I think we all look forward to that. There will now be a short break of 2 minutes before we move on to our next session, our fireside chat. So please stay with us, everybody. And thank you all again. Thank you, Vera. Thank you, Kent. And thank you, Marjan. Thank you, Eric.